And let's get more reaction now to the decision by South Africa to build another nuclear plant. And of course, we heard from the electricity minister yesterday, and we now speak to Mohamed Madhi, Sinan Energy CEO. Thank you so much for your time. Firstly, let's start with your reaction to the recent approval for nuclear energy procurement.
Hi, and good afternoon to the viewers. You know, I was in the nuclear industry back in 2009, 2010, and I was CEO of the largest nuclear energy company at the time. And at that time, had South Africa gone the nuclear route, it would have made a lot of sense. Today, we would have had, can you imagine the situation? We would have had no power shortages, no load shedding, more than sufficient power. Because at the time, what government was looking at was approximately 9.6 gigawatts of nuclear electricity. But in 2023, to propose 2,500 megawatts, to me, does not make any sense. Technology has changed very dramatically, especially over the last 10 years. Renewable energy prices have dropped significantly, fivefold over the last 10 years. And if you look at the timelines that are proposed for the nuclear plants, it's 15 years from now. 15 years from now, we would have had, hands down, renewable energy being cheaper than nuclear energy, even on a continuous basis. So those are the context of where South Africa is from a nuclear energy point of view. But also very importantly to understand is that 2,500 megawatts is probably too small. Nuclear is that kind of energy where if you're going to get into it, you've got to go either very large or not at all. And, you know, we are going at 2,500 megawatts, which means we won't build a local nuclear industry with that. And we will be beholden to these international companies for majority of the supply chain around the nuclear.
And I suppose then listening to you, it doesn't make much financial sense then. And does it look like we're moving with the times as far as technology is concerned?
So sadly, no. I think, you know, nuclear, again, we're not looking at the picture 15 years from now. And the trends are there to support that view. So we know that renewable energy, for example, has dropped fivefold, so over 500% in the last 10 years. And 15 years from now, battery energy storage combined with solar, combined with wind, combined with even smaller wind plants are going to be the norm. In addition to that, we're going to have this mass decentralization of energy. So you would have multiple on-site power plants, which reduces the need, doesn't eliminate, but it reduces the need for centralized power. And I think that has not been properly factored into the thinking around nuclear.
And yesterday we're speaking to, someone who's been watching this process very closely, and they say that from their vantage point, this is a good move, particularly when you think about the Energy Action Plan that provides for the short-term, medium-term and long-term solution. Does it then make sense on a long-term goal? Because I'm listening to what you're saying, and particularly when you think about the variables in terms of prices for the reactors that we're looking at, the capacity that we could be doing, and getting in the future. Does it make sense for us, given the current challenges that we're facing right now with energy, to invest then in this? Because in his view, he was saying that the long term makes better sense here.
So look, the advantages of nuclear clearly are it's going to be baseload power, but it's not going to be cheap. And what we need to be very clear about as a country is exactly how much it's going to be costing us to put in place nuclear, and especially a small amount of nuclear. Then if you look at the amount, the actual number being mooted, 2,500 megawatts, that, again, 15 years from now is going to be about 3% of our requirement. 3% is not going to move the needle much either way. So, it's too little, too late, unfortunately, for nuclear.
And I wonder, how concerned are you? Because you've spent a lot of time, over a decade working in this particular field. There are concerns when you think about construction, for example, where we're finding ourselves right now with Medupi and Kusile being told years later that there are structural defects. At the same time, when we think about, the procurement of nuclear those many years ago, there was, of course, concern around transparency. How much of an issue does this also become going forward now as this process is set to kick off?
Look, unfortunately, nuclear is one of those things that's always mired in controversy. and, a lack of transparency by its very nature. So the time I was involved in nuclear was before the Russians got involved, and it was a fairly clean process at that time during President Mbeki's time in office. But as soon as that changed, the entire nuclear procurement process in this country became very muddied and very murky. And I'm hoping that if we do go ahead with this, hopefully we don't, but if we do go ahead with this, that it becomes a very clean, open process, and that we have many sets of eyes, including from the private sector, on the process that's going to unfold. Because, it affects everyone in the country.
And Mohamed, I'm keen to hear your thoughts then on this one. Given the plans that have been put in place in South Africa right now and the energy crisis that we are in, can we now, as South Africans, imagine a situation where load shedding is non-existent, looking at the current plans?
Look, that is actually a distinct possibility if we speed up some of the obstacles and blockages in the system that allows the private sector to build power plants. So right now, the on-site power plants where the private sector is allowed to build power plants, and companies like that do independent power generation can sell power to a private client on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. Now, where we're able to build wheeling plants, we need to include Eskom. And unfortunately, including Eskom, delays that process quite considerably. If we can speed that process up, we'll have the private sector contributing very meaningfully, very financially viably to the alleviation of the load shedding crisis. Yeah. So that is a bottleneck. If that bottleneck is removed, I foresee that we'll have a much better situation going forward.
Mohamed, appreciate your insights this afternoon. That was Mohamed Madhi, Sinan Energy CEO.